It's Training Tuesday time. I don't 4 minutes late, I think. Apologies for that. I got caught up in something and literally lost track of time. So only when I heard the church bells ringing down the road did I realize, it's 6. It's time for Training Tuesday. So, welcome to Training Tuesday. We're here tonight to think about rules and the rules that you live by, or maybe the rules that you don't want to live by, and why they're there and what they're all about. And I was thinking about this because last week I was working with a client who is defining some things about her business, and it turns out that the premise of her business really is around breaking rules, which is a really cool kind of value to have in a company. It was very cool to be talking about that, but it got me thinking about like all the rules. All the rules we break, all the rules we follow, all the time, and a lot of times without thinking about it. And that got me thinking about rules that have recently changed and the implications of that. So I want to talk about rule breaking, but I am going to go back in time with you a little bit to show how these rules have evolved and how society has evolved with them, and why it's so important for us, particularly as women. I'm focusing a lot on our gender tonight, particularly as women, to pause and ask the questions. Ask why. Ask why. Question more deeply what the rule is about, who made the rule, why it matters, what the risks are when you follow it, and what the risks are when you don't. That is the purpose of tonight's conversation. So, welcome to Training Tuesday. My name is Natalie Hahn. I am your coach tonight for Who Said So? Rethinking the rules you live by. And I'm very happy to have you all here. And hey, I see Terry's here and Jackie is here. I'm also glad to see the comments appear to be working, so I'm happy about that. So, let us discuss. We are a society governed by rules. And there are, not going to deny, there are some very good reasons for a lot of the rules and a lot of the laws that we have. And then there are some not so good reasons. And then there are some outdated reasons. And one of the things I was looking at, just for fun, because it is fun, was blue laws. So blue laws are the laws that states have put in place. They're state statutes that usually are around prohibiting people from entertainment stuff or shopping commercial stuff. Those are blue laws. Usually they're old and outdated, but there are some that are still on the books that I found, and I thought they were kind of funny. So I just wanted to share those for you to just because they're funny. So hey, Joyce, it's good to see you. So for example, I have a little PDF somewhere that I found of laws in all 50 states, blue laws in all 50 states. But I picked out Massachusetts because that's where I live, and these are things that are good for me to know. So in Massachusetts, it is still illegal. Now, as far as I know, these blue laws are still in effect. And I know that a few years ago, they did get rid of a bunch of the blue laws. I don't know that they got rid of all of them. So these maybe are gone. The PDF I found at the time it was written said these were still in effect. So one of them is at a wake. A wake. So if you're not from the very Irish Catholic area of New England that I'm in, a wake is basically the party after a funeral where you toast your deceased and you tell good stories about them, and everybody does a form of, not everybody, most cultures do some form of a wake. Not all call it a wake, but at any rate, at a wake, this is the blue law. This is the law in Massachusetts. At a wake, a mourner, a sad person at the wake, may not eat more than 3 sandwiches. So in Massachusetts, we legislate the amount you can eat at a funeral. You can only have up to 3 sandwiches. Don't know why. It is illegal. I put this in the promo if some of you saw it. It is illegal in Massachusetts to put tomatoes in clam chowder. Now, I don't know why you'd want to put tomatoes in clam chowder. That's a different question. It's illegal here. You have to cross a state line. I don't know if this is a law in Connecticut as well, or Maine, or New Hampshire, but there you go. It is illegal in my fair state to keep a mule on the second floor of a building if there are not two exits to the outside on that second floor. Just in case you have a mule that you want to take upstairs. It is illegal in Massachusetts to have a gorilla in the back seat of any car. And snoring is prohibited in Massachusetts unless all the bedroom windows are closed and securely locked. It's got to make you wonder, like, what's happening here in this state? That at some point in our past, these had to become laws. Who was driving gorillas around in the backseat of their car? And who was taking donkeys upstairs? Sorry, mules upstairs. Right? There are reasons laws exist. These ones, you got to kind of wonder about our past. So what I'm curious about for you, ladies in Dirty Girls Consulting, what is a rule that you followed, or that you still follow, or that you followed in the past that you kind of look at and go, that was really ridiculous, or that was outdated? What are some rules that are part of maybe your everyday life, or were part of your past, or part of a culture that you belong to, that you kind of sit back and go, maybe not, right? They're hysterical. Maybe that's what it is, Joyce. Maybe in Massachusetts, we just don't like New Yorkers, so their clam chowder can have tomatoes, but ours can't. It's a good point. I don't know. I don't think I've ever had Manhattan clam chowder, but I think you might be right. It's a good point. So the state passes rules just to be mean to other states, right? Like, we're not them, so we're going to pass a... Like, you just got to think, that's amazing. So what are some rules that you follow? Like, maybe they're household rules, maybe they're family cultural rules, right? I would love to know, what are the rules that you guys follow, still today maybe, that you kind of sit back and go, that's a little old-fashioned, outdated, not really my thing, whatever it is. What I wanted to discuss also tonight was, I looked at the history of laws that have been passed, and again, my mind is on women and all things women, and I initially went back to like the 1900s, or no, I went back to the I think I went back to like the 1840s, and then thought it was too much. Like, we would have spent an hour and a half talking about all the laws since the 1840s to the present that have been passed that were about women and women's rights, and thought, no. So then I thought, well, let's just stick to my lifetime. And then I went just a few years before my lifetime, because one of the most important acts that was passed in 1963 was the Equal Pay Act. 1963, the Equal Pay Act said that equitable wages had to be paid regardless of your race, your religion, your color, your gender, right? Any of that, your national origin. So if you were an immigrant, if you were a woman, if you were a person of color, doesn't matter. You had to be paid not the same, equitable, fair wages. 1963 was when we decided that was a thing. In the South, you can't eat fried chicken with a knife and a fork. I believe that, and I agree with that. I'm going to go with that. So 1963 was the Equal Pay Act. 1964 was the Title VII Civil Rights Act that said, oh, and not only should pay be equitable, but the next year they said, oh, by the way, you got to hire them. The Civil Rights Act prohibited employers from discriminating against women, people of color, religion, or national origin immigrants. 1964. Again, just a few years before I was born. 1972, pay attention to this please, in 1972, so I was born 1970, I was 2 when the Supreme Court ruled that single women could get contraceptives. Prior to 1972, single women were not allowed to get contraceptives, and married women had to have the signature of their husbands in order to access contraceptives. Insanity. 1972. 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. I was 4 years old when my mother could finally get a credit card in her name based on her own income. 1974, before women could have credit in their own name. Now here's the kicker too. Up until then, for banks that would give women credit, they needed a male co-signer, and their income would be discounted by as much as 50%. So we get our credit, right, based on how much money we earn. The bank runs their formulas of, well, here's your debt ratio, blah, blah, blah. And we think you can afford X amount of credit. So we're going to give you a credit card for, I don't know, $500 credit line based on all of this. But if you were a woman in 1973, you needed a male co-signer vouching for your credit. And then the bank would say, but actually, even though you make this amount, and you would normally get a credit line of $500, you're a woman, you might, take leave to go take care of children, or you might have to take care of sick relatives, and so we can't really rely on your income being what it is, so we're only going to give you $250 or a $300 credit line. Just because we were women, your credit was discounted. 1974, my friends. 1981. It was 1981 before the courts ruled that a husband could not take out a second mortgage on their home without telling his wife. I was 11. Up until I was 11, my father could have taken out a second mortgage on our home and not told my mother. And then he could have dropped dead and left her with 2 mortgages, which is, I suspect, one of the reasons why this finally came around. In 1984, the state of Mississippi ratified the 19th Amendment that said women could vote. So the Women Could Vote Amendment, I should look it up because I should know this. It was 1920, 21? Somewhere in the early 1920s, women were finally allowed to vote. The suffragettes, right, made their impact. Mississippi, I'm pretty sure, let women vote after that, but nobody bothered to actually ratify the agreement and make it a real thing, a legal thing for women until 1984. I feel like that was an oversight, but I also thought it was kind of funny, so I left it in. 1994. I was in grad school in 1994. 1994 is when we passed the Gender Equity in Education Act, which meant that we should teach girls and boys equally the maths and sciences. And we should be counseling our teenagers on pregnancy and sexual harassment. I was in my 20s by the time we decided that that was a thing we should be talking about with teenagers. Same year, we finally funded the Violence Against Women Act. 1994, the Violence Against Women Act provided services for women who were victims of rape and domestic violence. And it allowed them to seek damages in courts for these crimes. It increased training among police and other services and court-related teams, people. So there was a little more sensitivity about how we talk to women who were victims of crimes like this. And it established the first 24-hour national hotline for battered women. Services not available to your mothers or your grandmothers. It took us till 1994 to decide that women needed protection from abusive men. In 2005, we reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act to provide more federal funds for victims, where we created shelters for women who were fleeing domestic violence, where we created more intervention programs to assist children who were part of those family units and who were at risk for domestic violence. And then we reauthorized it again in 2013 to add coverage that extended to Native American women on Native American tribal lands, and lesbians, and immigrants. So reauthorization means we basically said that law that we passed before in 1994, and we forgot a few things. So here's a few things we're adding to it. We added to it the intervention programs. We added more funding for housing and shelters for women. We added to it protection for immigrant women, for Native American women, and for lesbians. Why we forgot about them. So we had to add them on late. So why am I talking about all of this? I'm talking about all of this because the fact that we had to create these laws, means there was a different law, there was a different rule, a different standard, a different way of living that was in place before this was. Why was that? Why was that? Those laws were there for a reason, the ones before. The laws and the rules in place that prevented women from managing their own money, that prevented women from owning their own property, from being able to get credit and loans to buy a house or buy a car, that didn't allow them to do things without a male's signature and male approval, that didn't educate them equally, that didn't fund sports and other activities equally. Why? Why would men put rules and laws in place preventing those things? That's the question I want you to ask. Because when you ask that question about those types of laws, it's really disturbing. And we can look at history. We can look at history and we can say, historically, patriarchy, male-dominated society, this is just the way things were, and on and on. We can. And there's truth to that. There's also truth that prior to the Middle Ages, prior to the Black Plague and the medieval era and the rise of Europe, there were a lot of societies in Europe and in other parts of the world that were matriarchies, and where women had equal rights to own property in the Middle East up until we hit the Middle Ages. Equal rights. They had equal rights. They could be rulers. They had equal power. We took a dive. Right? Why would men put those rules in place? Now, I want to talk about it in that big picture because I think that's where it's the most impactful, where we go, holy cow, there was a rule in place. There was a law in place where my mother could not get a credit card in her own name. Had my father died when I was little, and she was on her own trying to support the family, she could not buy her own house, she could not buy her own car. She could not manage her finances without a man co-signing. She would have had to have gone to her father or her brother in order for her to manage her own life. It sounds so ridiculous to the modern mind, right? To those of us who are fortunate to have been growing up when these rules were taking place, when they were being overturned. But we don't ask the questions still enough. We're able to turn over those big things with some of the little things. So a few weeks ago, I talked about Ellen Langham. Ellen Langham is the person I quoted a few weeks ago when we talked about making decisions, and this idea that when you make a decision, there's a right decision and a wrong decision. And we stress so much about choosing the right one. But if you enter decisions with the idea that there's a right decision and a wrong decision, you're also entering with the idea that there's a predetermined outcome and you're just trying to guess which one it is. That somehow you're going to be able to know the future and how it's going to unroll. Therefore, there is a right and a wrong one. And her whole thing is like, no, that's not a thing. So flip a coin, make a decision, move on with your life. Quit stressing about it. You're creating unnecessary worry. That's Ellen Langham. Ellen Langham was the first woman professor in Harvard University's psychology department. Now, her whole shtick is really mindfulness. So she talks about decision making with this mindfulness slant, which is you can only be present in this moment. And she talks about rules the same way. A favorite quote I have from her that is all about rules and why we follow them and how they're made and all this is she says, we are frequently in error, but rarely in doubt. We are frequently in error, but rarely in doubt. That is how we move through life. Because we have all these rules. Why do we have rules? Can you guys tell me in the chat, why do we even make the rules? There are very good reasons why we have rules. Ellen Langham's perspective is we do have some rules for some very good reasons, but we don't question them enough. So often we move forward in life just being wrong, but we're not doubting, we're not questioning whether we're right or wrong because we're just going along with the rules because these are the rules that always were. This is how it always was. We create rules. Why? To get along. To create order, to create stability, because we are pockets of people, we are individuals, we are groups of people who have different beliefs, different values, different cultures, and we have to find a way to coexist. So rules play a really good role in leveling a playing field, making things very clear so that we know how to engage, what's expected, what's acceptable, what's not in this particular society, in this culture that we're in this city that we're in this household that we're in. They make sense. Rules also help preserve and protect, not just ourselves from each other, but rules that protect the environment. There's a reason when you go on a hike through a place, through a wetland or something, that there will be signs that say, don't walk over here. We are protecting this environment, because if you step on that grass, you're crushing something in that ecosystem that other organisms need to live. So we have rules for protection, for preservation, and they all make sense. They're good rules. But rules have limitations. Rules are created by a single perspective, right? There's a single perspective that says this needs to be the rule, this is the way things are, this is the way things should be, and they're a moment in time. So a single perspective created in a moment of time creates the rule. The perspective is today, right now. Today, right now. I cannot walk in that particular part of this wetland, because in this moment in time, this needs to be protected and preserved. That may be true for the time the rule was made. Is it true 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later? Maybe, but maybe not. And that's the challenge, and that's why I talked about the blue laws up front. Those rules were made ages ago. They don't make sense anymore, honestly. I'm not sure the gorilla or the donkey one made sense then, but they definitely don't make sense now. But we don't question them. We never took them off the books. We don't go back and revisit the why around the laws and the rules we create. And when we don't go back and revisit, we stay in these outdated situations. But if we're mindful, to steal from Ellen Langham, and we're in the present moment, in this present moment, we can take in the multiple perspectives of what was it like in the past? What is it like right now? Who are the players involved and what's the impact on them? We can see what applies and what doesn't apply, what still matters and what doesn't matter. So what are the rules that you live by today? And how are these rules impacting you and your life and the way you're moving through life? Do you have rules around what you do for a living, what you think you're qualified for, what you're not qualified for? Do you have rules around how much money you make? How much money is too much money? Do you have rules around your family? How often do you go visit your family? How often are they allowed to come into your house, and how long are they able to stay? Do you have rules around what we do and don't do for dinner? Do we dress for dinner? Do we always sit at the dining room table, or do we eat at the kitchen? Are we allowed to eat in our bedrooms? Do you have rules for your kids around screen time, bedtime hours, homework time? Which friends can they hang out with? What are the rules you have around after Labor Day? Is anybody wearing white pants right now? It's almost November. Do you have a rule about whether or not you can wear socks and sandals? Do you have rules around the way you write your resume? Rules around the way a poem is written, an essay is constructed. Rules around the right way to dance, the right way to dress, the right way to do your makeup. My God, we have so many rules. We don't question them. What is a rule you're thinking about that's applying to your life that maybe deserves a question? And I have five questions that I think you should ponder as you think about the things you're doing thoughtlessly, going through the motions, because this is the way it is, this is the way it's always been. We have rules at work for how we work with coworkers, how we tackle projects, how we move through groups and processes. We have rules in our home environment. We have rules in society. And a lot of them deserve to be questioned. First question to ask is, what purpose does this serve? What purpose does this serve? Who made the rule? What was the intention behind the rule? When the intention is to preserve and protect, does that thing still need protection? if the rule is you can't apply for this job unless you have this degree, is that still valid? Is it? Do you remember the days when, back in 1997 or 98, maybe it was 98, it used to be the rule that you could not apply to work at McDonald's, Burger King, any of the fast food places unless you had a high school diploma. And in the town that I lived in at the time, I was living in the Midwest, I was in Bloomington, Indiana, the local McDonald's said, the high school diploma is worthless. These kids are coming in with high school diplomas. They can't read properly. They can't do the math on the cash registers in order to give out change. It's ridiculous. We have to now raise our standards. So the high school diploma became antiquated. We've kind of done the same thing with college degrees, right? College degrees have become a check the box. So what is the purpose of the rule? The purpose of the rule for them, for McDonald's back in 1998, I'm going to say, was it held a standard so that they knew that the people they were talking to had the basic qualifications for the job. It didn't hold anymore. Now they really did need to look at every individual applicant and not be able to say they have a GED or they have a high school education, therefore they can at least do this. No, they had to actually go do testing of each of their applicants. So who made the rule? What's the intention? Is the first question. It tells you a lot about the rule. Second question, does this rule align with my values? Now go back and visit that list of laws that have been changed over the last 60 years that I walked through. Does it align with my values that a woman can't get contraceptive because she's single? Why was that rule made by men? Because women were supposed to be pure and not have sex before marriage anyway. And then if a woman is having sex in marriage, her husband should have a say over whether or not she's on the pill and they're having children. Those were the rules. Does that align with my values? Does the rule around me not able to get my own line of credit align with my values? Does the rule around wearing white pants after Labor Day align with my values? Does it align with your values? This helps clarify for you whether it's outdated, whether it's misaligned with you, whether it's even a priority. Okay. Question number 3. What are the consequences if I follow the rule? Because there are consequences. Sometimes the consequences are good. The consequence of following the rule is everybody's going along and getting along. Awesome. I follow the rule, I'm protecting the environment. Great. I'm following the rule, nobody's going to question why I'm wearing white pants and it's October 28th. Nobody will ask me why I'm wearing socks with my sandals. Why my hair is short or long. It used to be, there was like a thing that like if you're over the age of 60, you can't have long hair. Who made that stupid rule up, right? So the consequences, what are the consequences of following the rule? Because the other consequences of following the rule is we continue to endorse a rule that no longer serves us. What if we hadn't overturned the rule about women being able to get their own credit and manage their own money in 1972? Where would we be today? Fourth question is the flip. What are the consequences of breaking the rule? If you break the rule, what's the worst thing that happens? And if you break the rule, what's the best thing that happens? There was a point where the rules needed to be broken because women were being left widows, they were being divorced and left widows with no ability to manage their own money because they never had access to it before. They were never taught it in schools before. Math and sciences, we didn't need it. We were sent to home ec class. What is the risk when you break the rule? What is the outcome when you break the rule? Does this lead to growth, innovation, change that's good for us, that moves us in line with modern society, or does this create chaos and anarchy? I am not suggesting we question all the rules to create anarchy. I am suggesting that there's a lot of rules we follow without even thinking about it, and maybe we should. And some of the rules maybe we don't have to think about. It's fine. If you're happy with it and it doesn't bother you, you let it go. But if this is a rule that you've sat back and thought, I wonder why we do that, then maybe it is worth questioning a little more deeply. Question number 5. Am I following this rule because it's helpful or because I'm just used to it? Am I just following this rule because it's what I've always done? If it's something you've always done, is it something you should still be doing? Questioning whether the rule actually benefits you versus it's just a habit makes it easier to decide if it's a rule you need to change. And you may decide, you know what, I follow this rule, it's just a habit, and I have no need to change it. It's totally cool. Or you may say, I have been following this rule my whole life and I don't need to follow it anymore. It never occurred to me that I could change this and do something else. It's time to think about it. It's time to think about what the rules are, which ones you're going to follow, and rules mold over time, right? So when I was a kid, we had certain traditions, family rules around what we did for the holidays. For example, Christmas is coming up, and I was just looking at my plans for Christmas. And Christmas holidays in my family became a rule that we broke, that we reinvent every year. When my kids were little, we had certain traditions, and I think traditions are awesome. I think they're great, but we had certain traditions around where we were for Christmas and what we opened on Christmas Eve. We always opened a present on Christmas Eve. Did we open all of them on Christmas Eve? Did we open them, wait till Christmas morning? Was there always one gift from Santa? Yes, it was always unwrapped. Like, we had traditions and rules that we followed for the holidays for the benefit of the kids. And I would love to carry on those traditions, and maybe one day, if I have grandchildren, we will reinstitute those traditions. But as my kids got older, we started moving away from it, not because we didn't love the traditions, but because they didn't work anymore. Now, everyone in my family is spread out all over the country. And for those of you who ever travel during the holidays, you know it's really hard and painful and expensive. And so we have, on occasional years, celebrated Christmas on the 27th or the 28th instead of on the 25th. And when we do that, and we end up celebrating Christmas a few days later because we can all get airline tickets cheaper on the 26th than we can on the 23rd, when we do that, we end up celebrating my mother's birthday in June, even though her birthday is December 27th, but we don't want it getting all mashed up with Christmas. It's not fair to her. So then we move her birthday out conveniently 6 months and we celebrate it then. We break the rules around birthdays. We break the rules around the timing of what's expected or what should be done because it didn't work for us. And because we have flexibility in our family because of where everybody is and because of the effort it takes to get together, to say, would be awesome to follow the rule that on December 25th we all get up and we sit around the tree and we have a big breakfast and we open our presents. Can't follow that rule right now. Order of priorities. Doesn't mean we won't reinstitute it at a later date, but we're not doing it right now. It doesn't mean just because the job posting says you have to have this degree or this certification to get the job that you're going to take that rule, take that law and say that means I can't apply. Maybe it's time for you to test the boundaries of that law and say, but is that really a thing? Or am I still a really good candidate? Is there a rule in your head around the role that you play with your parents, with your children, with your partner, that you sit back and go, do I need to play this role? Is this my role to own and to play? Or am I doing this out of habit because this is what I've always done? If you are a mother, you know what this is as your kids grow up. Your role as a mother changes. The role I play in my kids' lives now that they're all in their 20s is very different than when they were teenagers or when they were grade schoolers. And trust me, it's not easy to change those rules. I still, when they're home visiting, want to make their lunches, want to wake them up, want to do the things. I still want to do these mothering things that are not my job anymore. And I have to stop and say, okay, I'm breaking those rules. The rule that we had when you were growing up in this house, when you were going to school in this house, when I was your mother, is different. Thank you, Joyce. And actually, sometimes we do celebrate Orthodox. My father is Russian Orthodox. Sometimes we do celebrate that. So it's just on timing. But again, for us, the importance was not the date. It was when we could get the family together, and that's when we celebrate. So So anyway, I want you to be thinking about your rules, what you wear, how you look, what you think, who you interact with, why you interact that way, what are you doing at work, what are the jobs that mean something to you. I guarantee you that 80% of the rules you follow every day, you follow automatically, are unconscious, they're habitual, and most of them probably don't really need to be looked at too closely. 80%. They're the rules that help us get along in society. 15%, you sit back every now and then and go, that's stupid. Why do we do that? And then you move on with your day. Because that's what we do. We might note, I don't like that rule. That's a dumb rule. Or that rule doesn't really fit with me, but everybody else is going along with it, so I guess I should too. 5%, if that high, maybe not even as high as 5%, let's be generous, 5% stick in your craw. And every time you have to follow that rule, something in you just dies a little bit. Something in you goes, God, I hate this. This is dumb. I should change this. And often we don't. We don't make the move. We don't make the change. So I'm inviting you to look at all your rules. All of them. Look at all the rules. And instantly, a whole bunch of them, you're just going to go, yep, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. You will be left with a group. You'll sift through it. You will be left with a group to say that you're going to look at and go, okay, so why is this? This one isn't sitting with me so well. This one I'm not sure I believe anymore. This one, I get why that's a rule, but is it still really a meaningful rule? Question it. Absolutely, Jackie. You question at work the why. Not to be anarchist, not to be annoying, not to be contrarian, but because if we're going to get to the lives that we want to lead, if we're going to make decisions as leaders of our own lives, to live our life the way we want, in the style that we want, we have to start questioning the rules that we live by. When you sift through the 100% of your rules and you're left with that 5% that in the back of your head, you're like, yeah, I wonder about these. Does this have to be a thing? Does it have to be a thing? And then you drill down and focus on those. Why is this a rule? Who made the rule? What was the intention behind this rule? Does it serve me? Does it fit my values now? What happens if I break the rule? What happens if I keep going with the rule? Am I following this out of habit still? Or now is it a conscious choice? Ask yourself those questions. You will, if you change just one rule in your life, you will utterly change your life. I promise you that. Change one rule that you're living by that no longer serves you, and you will dramatically change how you show up, where you show up, the energy that you bring to the table, because you are taking back control over the choices that you make. Just one little rule at a time. Terry Pratchett, you guys ever read, if you read Terry Pratchett, he's one of my favorite authors. Terry Pratchett said, look, that's why there's rules, understand? So that you think before you break them. Think before you break them. If we're just breaking rules willy-nilly because we want to, because we feel rebellious, that's not thoughtful, that's not mindful, that's not going to get us where we want to go. That's just chaos and anarchy. That's just being rebellious and kind of a jerk. Think about the rules, and then go break them. All right, my friends, that was my message for Training Tuesday tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for thinking about the rules that you live by. Would love to hear what the rules are that you are still living by, how you're questioning them, what you might be thinking about doing differently. Post it in the chat and in the comments. And in the meantime, it is a pleasure to see you again tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. Have a fabulous week.